when you answered my email, you told me about the trip to Rotterdam. That was quite an amazing story. Could you tell me? Well, you had some memories about the Netherlands, about Rotterdam in particular. 1953, you were on a trip to Europe, and you were on a boat, on a Dutch boat or a German boat that was.
It was a Dutch boat that had been dredged out of the Rotterdam harbor a couple of weeks earlier. It had been sunk during the war.
That was an amazing story. So let's talk about education. I want to focus on education because that's my core business as well. It's hard not to talk about the Corona crisis, but let's do it in combination with education. What has the crisis done to education?
Well, it's had a big effect. For children, it means they're not having the enormous advantage of congregating together in a school setting, which in a decent school can be very valuable. They're stuck with home schooling, which sometimes is okay, sometimes not. Up to the level of universities, it's very unclear whether or how universities are going to survive. There's been, in the United States or anywhere where the neoliberal rules have been followed, there's been a sharp cutback in public funding for universities. State universities in the United States have state funding has sharply declined. Now they're being hit with another blow. Many rely on tuitions, including foreign tuitions, and that's mostly gone, so they have a huge financial blow. The educational it's pretty clear that in the fall, most universities will still be doing online teaching. They're preparing for that. I'm now preparing with my colleagues for an online course at our university. This is okay, but it's not like having a live classroom interaction, either for large classes, lectures, or for seminars. So you can adapt to it, but it's really far from optimal. And how universities and schools will emerge from this is unclear. I suspect we know one thing that's happening. The harsh, brutal sections are persisting with the constant class war that they pursue relentlessly. They would like to privatize education, eliminate the public system, which of course means it works for the rich and not for anyone else. But that's the core principle of the more savage version of capitalism, the neoliberal version in every domain. So, for example, take right today, Trump is trying to kill the Postal Service because the Postal Service doesn't make profit for the rich. It only provides services for the population. So in many parts of the country, nothing is going to reach people except the Postal Service. But who cares? We can dispense with them. The Postal Service in many communities, I've seen it myself, is a place where people go in the morning to the post office to have somebody to talk to meet your friends, community place. But there's also something in the background that people aren't talking about very much, that is very serious. The post office is extremely dangerous. It's highly efficient. It serves people, and it can get people to think maybe you can do something for yourselves, not mainly through the government, not hand it over to private enterprise to run. So it's out of your hands. I mean, the core of neoliberalism in the Netherlands, the United States, and anywhere else is to destroy democracy, to move decisions from the government which has some accountability to the population, into private hands, private tyrannies, in fact, which is what corporations are, in which you have no influence whatsoever. You're totally unaccountable. That's the idea. And to make that work, you have to get people to believe that governments can't do anything. But of course they can. They do almost everything. But you have to knock that out of people's head. And when you have an efficient service that's working for everyone, it's just a bad idea.
That's something you described in this book as well. Education as a system of indoctrination. Is your message from this book, is it still relevant for today?
It can be. It doesn't have to be. I mean, there are also breaks from that, as you mentioned. But the official system, the system that's sort of imposed from above, is largely a system of indoctrination. In the United States, it's bipartisan. You can see it in the programs that have been instituted during the neoliberal years in the schools. The programs are basically teaching to test.
Mm-hmm.
Have to impose tests. The children have to learn a fixed amount of things and then put it out in a test, and then 2 weeks later forget what they learned. You all know that from our own experiences. Absolutely the worst possible model of education. You go back 200 years, this was ridiculed by during the Enlightenment. It was called pouring water into a vessel, the worst kind of education, and a very leaky vessel. As I say, we've all had that experience. Some course you weren't interested in, you figured, what the hell, pass the exam. So you worked to pass the exam, and 2 weeks later you forgot what the course was. And that has the good advantage of indoctrination, blocking creative activity. I mean, I've talked to school teachers. I've heard from school teachers tell me what happens. I talked to a bunch of school teachers. A sixth grade teacher came up to me afterwards and told me experience. She was talking about something in class. The kid came up afterwards and said, that was really, look into it. You told me what to look at. And the teacher was forced to tell her, you can't. You have to study for the exam. Your future depends on it. My salary depends on it, but she didn't say that. And that goes on all over the place. It's a perfect way to eliminate creativity, independence, thinking, challenges to authority, and just drive people into a mold. You don't have to follow it. I know teachers who buck it, but it's not easy.
We hear about Trump all day long, but Trump is not the one who is responsible for education. That's Betsy Devos. How do you look back on her nearly 4 years in office?
Betsy DeVos is probably the cruelest and most sadistic of the collection of criminals in the Trump administration. Her thing is private schools. That's it. Get rid of the public school system. But every move she makes is just sheer sadism. So a couple of days ago, she came out with an edict saying, there's some of this stimulus money is going to schools, but some of it's for relief for students who are in trouble. She said it cannot go to DACA students, the so-called undocumented kids who were brought here as children. Can't go to them. We have to strangle them, because that satisfies my sadistic impulses. There's no other justification for it. Her, apart from education, she comes from a very rich background, huge ton of money. Their foundation turns out to be the one that's funding these demonstrations at governors' offices, trying to get them to stop the lockdown, which of course will enormously spread the coronavirus. But that's a way to gain power and help Trump get reelected by appealing to people as if he's for freedom. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing too low for them. The main principle is get rid of public education. We don't want it. It's the kind of thing that makes people think the government can do something. It's a place where people can work together. Altogether, a very bad idea. Let's have privatized charter schools where we'll impose the curriculum. We can, of course, knock out anything useless, like aid to children with special needs. I mean, we don't need them. They can, they're just trash. And we'll just take the people who can serve our interests, who can make it to Wall Street.
And, all right, well, that's Betsy DeVos. What about her predecessor, Arne Duncan? Was he so much better?
He wasn't great, but at least he wasn't a dedicated sadist. And he wasn't, but I didn't like his programs at all. I thought they were ridiculous, very harsh.
Race to the top, punitive accountability, standardized testing. So how did you break with those rules in your own teaching practice? How did you make sure that you nurtured creativity in your own classroom?
Actually, my background was Deweyite progressive education. My father, who was a professor of education, strongly believed in that. I grew up with it. In fact, my parents sent me to an experimental progressive Deweyite school run by Temple University, which happened to have a very progressive education department. So I just experienced it all my life. I started teaching when I was a teenager, teaching Hebrew school. That's kids in the afternoon and Sunday morning. It's pretty tricky. I was doing it basically partly out of interest, partly that's how I was working my way through college. It's a hard teaching experience. These kids have been in school all day. Their friends are out playing baseball, and here they are, stuck in a classroom for a couple hours. But it was possible to use ways of getting them excited about the material, exploring, trying to understand things, having new ideas, and so on. Didn't work with every kid. A lot of them did. A lot of them loved coming to school. It can be done at any level. It can be done right now. There are in the sciences in the United States, there are groups who are working to devise science programs for schools. They're very good. I've worked with some of the people. I've seen how they work. That goes from kindergarten to high school. So one kindergarten program was started by the teacher gives each kid a shell, and on the shell there are a number of objects: a pebble, a seed, a blade of grass, a couple of things. And she proposes a challenge: find out which ones can grow. Then the class has a session where they talk to kids, where they talk about what you might do. The teacher is there. She sort of guides it, goes off in a crazy direction. But basically, the kids initiate. They come up with some ideas. Then they try them. And finally, after a couple of sessions, they've figured out a way to determine that it's the seed that grows. So once they've determined that, the teacher takes a microscope and a knife, cuts the seed open. Every kid looks inside and sees. That's at the kindergarten level. We go to the high school level. One of the really great programs, which is pretty tricky if you think about it, is to ask the class, how can a mosquito fly in the rain? Turns out if you look at it, it's kind of miraculous. When a raindrop hits a mosquito, if something of that force hit a human being, we'd be crushed. So how can it work? Got to learn some physics. You have to learn some biology. You have to work through a hard problem. It's not a trivial problem. You finally get it. You've learned how to think. That can be done at any level. And of course, at the college level, it's straightforward. It's not always done that way. I've had very boring courses in college. But if you get to a place like, say, MIT, where I spent all my life, the classes aren't, the grades are almost irrelevant. In fact, famous statement by one of the world's top physicists to his freshman class when he opens the class is, doesn't matter how much a kid asks, what are we going to cover? It doesn't matter what we cover. It matters what you discover. And that's the guiding principle. So if you don't learn all the facts, okay, it'll come up in a book. You have to learn how to think.
Charles,
in fact, one Nobel laureate, old friend of mine at MIT in biology, what he used to do in his graduate classes, his general classes, the advanced classes, he'd say, I'm going to give you a lecture without looking up any sources. This is what I think it ought to work like. It's your job to see if I'm right. It's any number of things you can
do. Charles Murray, author of The Bell Curve, once told me in our interview that universities are irrelevant, especially since nowadays many universities are offering MOOCs, and it's really you don't have to be in MIT or go to Harvard for 4 years in order to develop yourself. So how sustainable is the university system?
Well, with people like Murray, it's not sustainable. But suppose you ask Murray today, would you like to see a vaccine for the coronavirus? He'd say yes. He said, where do you want to go? To the executive board room, or to Oxford University, where they're in fact in the lead in creating a corona vaccine. Okay. Well, you know what it is. In fact, take anything else. I mean, you, Charles Murray, may not be interested in, say, Shakespeare's plays, but suppose somebody is interested. Suppose they're interested in the wealth of our culture, and unlike you, they just don't want to kick it down the road and be, work at an office for some Wall Street type, should they not have a chance.
How sustainable is our school system?
It's sustainable if the population wants to sustain it. If the population, say in England, votes for a Tory government, whose position is that university departments have to sell themselves on the market. So if Oxford wants to have a classics department, they have to show that they can sell it. Okay? If you want that, you can turn, I'm quoting now, you can turn first-class educational institutions into third-class commercial institutions. Stephen Collini commenting on the Tory effort to destroy the cultural wealth and future of England. So you can have that. There's equivalence here. I mean, I live in Arizona, happens to have the lowest funding per capita in the country for education. Actually, second lowest. Mississippi is lower. Well, you can do that. Then kids come into college where I teach, not knowing how to write an essay, read an article. I mean, they're very smart kids, like everyone else, so they can pick it up there. But is that what you want? In fact, the legislature barely funds the university, except for the Freedom Center, started by the Koch brothers, which teaches you wonders of free market, so-called. But the rest have to get by somehow. And right now, in the current straits, one possibility is that the legislature will keep the professional schools, which pay, and of course the Freedom Center will get to this kind of tourism. But that's not necessary. Now, people have voices. They can have a live, functioning school and university system at a fraction of the cost of today's huge amounts of money wasted at the university. Neoliberal views, a kind of business model has been imposed with to get into business, all kind of levels of management. This guy's a manager, so he has to have a sub-manager, and that one has to have a secretary. Then he has to try to figure out something to do with it. Something, enormous amounts of waste. And the tuitions have shot out to the stratosphere. There's no economic justification for them. It's easy to demonstrate. Take other countries, including the ones that have the best record in educational systems, like Finland and Germany. Education's free. Go right south of the border, Mexico, poor country. Very high quality, higher education system. Tuition, salaries go up, but tuition is free.
Talking about Finland, maybe you know this book, Finnish Lessons. It was written by a professor called Pasi Sahlberg. And he wrote in his book that Finnish education is so great because the Finnish system borrowed or copied many American inventions, like the Deweyite philosophy, like cooperative learning, even standardized testing at some point. So how come all these great inventions work in Finland and don't work? How come American educational inventions don't work in America, but they work in Finland?
It's not the only thing. I mean, take New Deal programs, Roosevelt's programs, like the Tennessee Valley Authority government program, which took the poorest part of the country, Appalachia, and made it functioning with electricity and industry and so on. Now you can't do that. Remember Reagan, government is the problem, not the solution, which translates as meaning take decisions away from the public sector and put them in the hands of private tyrannies. That's the translation. And it shows along the line. One of the things that suffered is education. Another thing that suffered is health. So take right now, hospitals don't have any extra beds, don't have equipment. Why? They're run on a business model. Business says you have to have efficiency, or you don't have anything spare. You have just enough to get by. It's like if you're running an automobile assembly line, you don't want to have something extra in case somebody gets sick. If they get sick, okay, the assembly line stops for an hour and then you start again. For a health system, that's a disaster. But even in normal times, I mean, I've had severe surgery at the best hospitals in the world. It's very unpleasant. There aren't enough nurses, there aren't enough beds. You've got to do all kinds of things. You can lie in the hall for 45 minutes wanting a drink of water. You can't get it. And that's not the end of the world, but it's not the way the decent hospital system should work. And if anything goes wrong, it's just total disaster. Take a look at what's happening in New York right now. The doctors and nurses are absolutely heroic, but don't have equipment, have nothing, because everything's been cut back to the bone, following neoliberal business principles. So yeah, it's a disaster everywhere. Only up in Europe. But of course, that's what happens if these models are imposed. education is one of them. And what I don't know the book, but I'm sure what he said is correct. The Deweyite systems were never widely practiced in the United States. They're too subversive, but they did exist, and you could find them. Actually, the experimental school that I went lasted until about 5 years ago, 90 years, and there were others younger. But it was always a kind of, there are a lot of things like that. The United States, to an unusual extent, is a business-run society, and you can see it. Like the United States is practically the only country in the world that doesn't have a public information system. It doesn't have, there is something called public broadcasting, but it's a minor fringe, and in fact it has to do with the corporations for funding. Nothing like the BBC, which happen to be companies as well.
Are there any?
Let's go back to the Postal Service for a minute. So take a look at the U.S. Postal Service. Why was it founded in the first place? Why did the framers of the Constitution include the Postal Service? You know why? Because they believed in government subsidy for the free and independent press. Almost all the Postal Service did was distribute magazines and journals at very low cost, because they wanted a free, independent press. That's the way they understood the First Amendment. Then the business culture started taking over, crushing it point by point. People fought back, so there's always a struggle, and there are also victories. But there's a very class-conscious business class which wants to drive out of people's heads the idea that you can do anything for yourself. The rich and powerful have to do it. You get extreme people like Betsy Devos, but it's common throughout the system.
Are there any easy fixes for education? How can we cure this ill system?
Straightforward. The way we can restore New Deal measures, the way we could have. Take, say, the pandemic. Why did it even come? It was known to scientists, certainly in 2003, after the SARS epidemic, that another one is very likely, probably another coronavirus epidemic. But knowing it isn't enough. You have to have somebody do something about it. Well, who's going to do it? Not the drug companies. They're loaded with profits, but you don't make any money out of preparing for something, a catastrophe in a couple of years, so they won't do it. Well, the government could step in. They do most of the creative work anyway, but they can't. Government is the problem, not the solution. We live in a neoliberal world of sadistic capitalism, not just capitalism, but sadistic capitalism. So the government can't step in. So therefore we get a crisis. It's all across the board. But it can be changed. It's not utopian to say, let's go back to something like the New Deal.
Well, how?
How? Well, for example, there's something called voting. There's also popular pressures, which make a big difference. So take, say, the Democratic Party. It's a corporate party ever since Clinton and the rest. But its policies have changed. Take a look at Biden's electoral program, way to the left of any Democratic Party program in the past. Why? Not because that's what he wants, but that's because the people are beating at the doors. Popular pressure is forcing it. And more can be forced. In fact, take Bernie Sanders' main positions and take a look at the commentary on them in the left part of the mainstream press. I don't care about the rest, but the more left progressive sector. His two main positions are universal medical care and free higher education. Can you think of any countries that have universal medical care? Can you think of any that don't have it? Every country has it in some form or other. How about free higher education? It's all over the place. So what Bernie Sanders' programs are saying, let's rise to the level of other countries. Now take a look at the commentary. Say Paul Krugman, very good commentary on the left. Say, well, these are great ideas, but the American public isn't ready for it. What they're saying is the American public is somewhere in the 14th century. They're not ready to do what every other country does. That's total nonsense, of course. The American public has done much more than that in the past. But it's the effect of driving into the heads, even of intellectual elites, that we're just hopeless. It's not true, but if you do the same with children, if you tell them that you're a dope, you're never going to do anything, you're not worth anything, they believe it. They won't do anything. And you can tell the population that too.
You say we can vote if we want to change the system, but Trump was elected in office 4 years ago. Do you really have high hopes that if we are going to vote in November again, that it's going to change anything? Well, in the best case scenario, it's going to be Joe Biden. Then what? Is education going to change for the better?
Certainly. First of all, you get rid of the worst. You'll get rid of Betsy Devos.
Right.
You'll have an opening to do something new. After that comes popular activism, and it can change things. Even with Nixon and Reagan, popular pressures changed their plans. You have someone a little bit more open and responsive, make a lot of difference. You look over history, that's the way it's worked. Even take the New Deal. If it hadn't been for the labor movement, for political parties, activism, it would never have been enacted. There's plenty that we can do. We're taught that we're like the kids in school who are told you're a moron, don't do anything. It's not true. Any opportunities available. With all its flaws, the United States happens to be a very free country. Nobody's going to put you in jail if you do what we're doing. So, maybe people won't like you, maybe you lose your job, but you're not going to be put in a torture chamber. It's not Chile. Okay.
So you have good hopes. What do you think is going to happen in November then?
It's the worst in November. Part of the reason is because of the left. There are segments of the left who are taking basically the position of the Communist Party in Germany in the early 30s under Stalin's orders. Everyone except you is a social fascist. So they're no different from the Nazis. So just join. So don't even bother building the labor movement to defeat the Nazis. They weren't the only ones, but they were. That social fascist line is being reiterated today. Joe Biden's just another corporate such and such. I'm going to vote for the capitalist pig. I'll vote for Trump and destroy everything. And of course, they don't say I'll vote for Trump. They say I won't vote for Biden, which, arithmetic happens to be the same as adding a vote to Trump. So I'll delude myself and say my conscience is clear. I'm not voting for Trump. Well, in fact, I'm casting a vote for Trump, for destruction of the environment, for stuffing the courts with ultra-right young lawyers who prevent anything from happening for a generation, for escalating the war in the Middle East, for destroying the World Health Organization, so unknown numbers of people can die in Africa. I'll vote for that because I want my conscience to be clear.
My last question, I know we have half an hour. My last question is about you, Professor Chomsky. I've seen so many interviews, but I tried to come up with a question that that hasn't been asked yet. And the question is, if you had to describe yourself in 3 books, 3 musical songs, and 3 dishes, what kind of Chomsky do we see?
I don't talk about myself. That's for others. I just do the things I think ought to be done.
All right. Well, let's when we talk about free minds, let's end it a different way. What 3 books do you advise people to read to see the world from maybe a new perspective?
I'm afraid I'm not very helpful. I'm asked this question all the time. Every day I'll get a dozen letters from young people asking this. And I think about it, and it's always the same answer. I can't possibly say. There's too many dimensions, too many choices. It really depends on what you're interested in. There's no general answer for everyone. So you have to find it yourself. Go to the library, go to a bookstore, browse around. You'll find a ton of things that are interesting, then decide what to pursue.
I always ask my interviewees, who do you recommend me for me to interview next? Who do you who inspires you as a person?
Yeah. Like there's doctors and the nurses in the front line, people fighting their rights in poor communities. Right now, poor communities all over the world, people are getting together for mutual aid. Let's help some disabled shut-in get food, things like that. That goes on all the time. And that's what's inspiring.
Yeah, I know. Well, thanks for your time, Professor Chomsky. I enjoyed our talk, and thanks for spending some time with me. So enjoy the rest of your day, and bye-bye.